So today we'll be looking at Sage Intacct Expense Management, and our agenda will be an introduction to Sage Intacct Expense Management, and then we'll look at expense types, payment types, expense management transactions that fall into expense claims, and then reimbursements for expense claims, and then we'll look at cash advances, where you take a cash advance and you retire, which is equivalent to cash advance being equivalent to the expense. We'll also see an instance where you take a cash advance and then your expense is lower than that, and then you have to pay back to the organization what you didn't spend. And then cash advance where the expense is greater than that cash advance, and then the company needs to reimburse you. So this will be our guide, and based on this, I'll just go directly into the solution. So this is Sage Intacct Expense Management. In terms of introduction, I will go to show you configuration once you subscribe to the solution. So if I go to applications, company, subscriptions, and then scroll down to time and expense, and click configure, or I can simply go to, because already here time and expense, go to setup and then go to configuration. So I'm not configuring this all over again. It's already been configured, but I'm just going to explain certain aspects of the configuration to you. So we're looking at account settings, and then we're considering journals. When an expense is raised, the journal that it's used to post transactions to the general ledger. The same for adjustments and when reimbursements for expense are done. And then we look at GL accounts that are related to expenses. So when an employee takes, for example, submits an expense claim and it's not yet paid, it's warehoused in the employee's expense payable account. So that you can also view that like how you would typically view an accounts payable account, and then you can also age it. And then multi-currency gain and loss for multi-currency entities. And when we talk about employee advances, so what is a cash advance, that is also contained in the balance sheet, where subject to when that employee retires, that cash advance remains outstanding to the employee. Then we're able to create expense types, allow reclassification of expenses, enable reversal of expense based unpaid expenses, the GL posting date to import to expense posting date 1199, and then posting frequency, once expense reports will be posted daily, same with adjustments and reimbursements. And this is looking at the dimensions that are related to expenses. We have said just employees and programs. And then looking at sequences, we have a sequence for expenses. This is what will generate the sequence number for expenses, or more like transaction references for expenses, and it won't allow for the use of duplicate numbers. And then also enables multi-currency. The default payment method for reimbursing claims or even cash advances is check, and then we'll define a default bank account, which can also change. We can change it during runtime. And then this is looking at expense report requirements, etc. Okay, and then we also have approval setup for expenses. So we have expense report approval, and then there are email notifications for whoever needs to approve. And here's where you would define who those approvals are, and the same for the reimbursements, who the approvals are. This bit is speaking to timesheet. We probably would have another video dedicated to that, but this particular application is dedicated to expense management. So having looked at this, we'll be looking at okay, so this is a overview of time and expenses. You can see data, expense types. Typically, it's employees that will raise expenses or cash advances, which is what you see in terms of task. And you see that the approval process is activated. So it is an expense. If there's expense for, you can enter your own expense for behalf of a colleague, and then it goes through an approval process, and when it's fully approved, it gets selected for reimbursements, and also the reimbursements goes for approval, and then default payment is checked, so you generate checks, and that typically closes the expense process. And then we have some reports that we can look at, standard reports, but we can also as well customize reports. So if I go ahead to go to the menu and I go to setup, at this point you can create employees. So if you have a new employee who has joined the organization, you can always set up the employee with an employee ID. If there are dimensions that are specific to that employee, you would specify what the start date, the employee's title, social security number, etc, contact information, and any other necessary details that may be required. We already do have some employees set up within the system, which we'll be using to run the test. Will be running through the system, and then the next thing we'll be looking at is that you can actually group employees. So you could have employees that fall within the typical example is that you could have accountants, as much as 10 accountants. So you can create a group of accountants and assign all those employees to accountants. And then types is slightly different. With this, you can kind of segregate if they are full-time or part-time staff. Okay, down to expense, I think I'll go to expense type first. Expense type is what you use to define what kind of expenses employees can incur, and then once they pick that expense, it's tied to a general ledger account, and then eventually gets posted into the general ledger and updates that expense account or an asset account, depending on the nature. But if it's strictly an expense, because if it's cash advance, it affects the balance sheet based on what it's about. But anything an expense type will typically affect an expense account. So for example, if I look at dues and subscription, you will see that the expense type is dues and subscription, the description is this, and then it's being posted to an expense account called 6350 dues and subscription. So if I were to create a new one, what I would typically do would be, so for example, if I wanted to create an expense account for utilities, probably gas, and just give it same name, and then I would have to look for the appropriate account. I think I have a gas account here, and then there's no set account, and I want it to be strictly USD. And then if I have to set stop date and add date, and once I do this, hold on, will not pretty well. Oh, sorry. The unit count. Okay, so I have to specify units. Currency, where is that? Sorry, I didn't get that through my bad. Define unit rate. Go back. Okay, could not create anyone. Okay. You know what? I'll just take out currency. Okay, what I'll do is just state the unit rate date. I think that would. Today's 28th, and just say 1.2. Let's see if this works. So this will be the unit rate between whatever the base currency and whatever that transaction currency is. So you see here, so that's an expense type. So depending on the kind of expenses within the organization, we can create as many expenses as possible. And then payment types, we just have one. So how do employees make payment? So I've just set up cash. Employee could make payment with their personal credit card and then seek reimbursements, or they could make payment with checks and then you must remember that set up only cash, and it's still the same process. You set up the name, description. If there's an offset account necessary, you specify what that expense account is. Now, having said this, we're going to be looking at four scenarios within the expense management. And these scenarios include one, an expense reporting in such a case where an employee incurs an expense, submits that expense claim. We'll see it go through approval, and then the employee gets reimbursed for that expense and using checks. And then we'll look at the cash advance case where the employee the cash advance is equal to the expense. So the cash advance could be $100 and the actual expense is $100, and then the employee retires, so automatically it nets off. And then there's a subsequent scenario where the cash advance could be higher than the expense. So in that scenario, the employee has to pay back some money to the company. And then the final one will be a situation where you have a cash advance and then the expense is higher than the cash advance, and then the company has to reimburse the employee for the extra funds involved. So we're going to run through these scenarios where we'll see, go through the approval process, see how payments or reimbursements is done and all that. So I will start with the first process where an employee has gone on a trip and he's here to submit expenses. So in this case, I am Emma, but I will be raising an expense on behalf of a colleague. In this case, I would say add an expense, and then who the employee is, I would say let me pick 37 kids here. So I was posting the currency in which you will notice that we have this red which red asterisks here. It simply means that these fields are mandatory. And then because of an expense claim, if the employee has incurred an expense, we want to see attachments in terms of probably invoices or receipts related to that expense. So the employee can always come here and look for that particular item by clicking on add and browse. But I'll just assign one attachment I already had and then enter a reason for the expense. Trip to let's see Toronto, and then I'll then go ahead to pick an expense type. By picking an expense type, automatically I'm picking a GL code that will be updated. So for example, if I say, because it's a trip, I'll say it's transportation, and I could say it's say $200. Payment type, I paid cash, and I paid to, let's say it's TTC, paid for transportation. And then I need to state the date. I was, use the same date as today that I've used up here, which is the 28th. And events, location, these are dimensions. I'm going to use dimensions that I know because this is my demo system. I do a lot of setup, so I could process a transaction and hit a brick wall. But it's just because I've set up something that or disabled something to enable me do a presentation. But I'm just going to try and work with these existing ones. If I click here, I'll see if I require more dimensions, and I think I always do require programs, so I'm still going to pick this. And then once this is done, you will see what I have here is submit. So I will do a submit, and then the expense claim goes to the person who's supposed to approve it. And then the person would get an email that he or she has an expense claim sitting in their tray for approval. So, for example, you see this coming, it's telling me about the expense claim, and then for case select, I pick that up, and then the person who's supposed to approve that is Chigozie here. So what he typically would do would be to come to applications, time and expenses, and then approve expenses. And then he already had something sitting there, but our focus will be this one that just got submitted, which is for Kate, and then he clicks on it. He can, view it. to look at, what the details are, open up the attachment if he needs to, and open up the attachment, look at the details, and if it's fine, he can approve. If not, he can decline. So, based on this, it's fine. He clicks on approve, and then it leaves his tree. So, having done this expense can be just a single approval process. Having done this automatically means that expense is available for reimbursement. Okay, so to treat reimbursement, what would happen is that Chigozie, who is the initiator or the person in charge of processing those transactions, will come and then look for expenses to reimburse. And in this case, you select this, and then it opens up. So you can, go ahead to filter by, where you think that expense is coming. If it's for a specific employee, do the enter the employee's details. If it's for a specific date, you can filter down and get what that expense is. But once you leave all this blank and you say list, it's going to pull up the list of everybody who has an expense claim. And from what you see, we have only Kate's expense claim outstanding. And then you will see that we have a bank account where it's paid. This is the default bank account. You can always change it. And in this case, we intend to reimburse her the entire $200. So once we do this, select this as the amount to pay. If not, if you are paying less than 200, what you would do would be to enter the amount, or click on split and then enter what amount you're paying now, and then the system will take note of that, and then the balance remains outstanding for that employee against the company. So having done this, once I say save, that reimbursement is processed. The next thing will be for the payment to eventually happen. And then we've configured payment to be by checks. So default payment is by check printing. So if I go to print checks, and I would see that item outstanding here, you will see it. So what I need to do is just click on print and do a print, and then it will generate a print check. So if I have my check documents, what I will need to do would be to print that and hand that over to that particular employee, or have it mailed to the employee. So once I do that, the payment isn't completed. You will notice that eventually it will, after I do the print, it checks the confirm, and once I confirm, this closes that transaction and it's out of there. So if I go, for example, for to my say my okay, let me just go to expenses, staff expenses. You will notice that that particular expense for sale logs is paid. So that's, closes it out and takes care of our first scenario of you incur an expense on behalf of the company, you raise an expense report, and you get paid, or you get reimbursed for that expense. So the second scenario will be a situation where the employee is about embarking on the trip, applies for a cash advance, gets that cash advance, and then returns, and then makes a retirement of the cash advance. So you will notice that we have advances here, and then we'll click advance, and I would okay, sorry, I'll just click on the plus sign to start creating one. And then who am I creating this advance on behalf? In this time, I would say I'm creating it on behalf of Jessica. Okay, and I want payment method to be checked. We have set this as default bank account. I'll just leave there. I'll pick a program which is required, and then I have to pick the expense type. So let's say this is for a conference that Jessica attended, and the conference cost $350. And I could say conference, maybe musical conference. It could be anything. You just have to enter that detail here, and then if there are dimensions related to it, I'm just going to pick this. It's related to this location. It's related to Jessica, who is the employee. Specify that here. It's Jessica. And then it's $350. So it's a cash advance. And then I would save. And this cash advance becomes an advance that Jessica has taken in anticipation of retirement. Okay, but this is within the system. We now have to go ahead and process the cash advance, and and to do that, we would go to print checks, and then you would see the amount here, $350, and then we check prints, and then say prints, and then it generates, and then would if we had check stubs, we'll print that and email or sorry, send to Jessica or hand it to her. And then once we confirm, it concludes that process of the cash advance. Now she has to go to that conference and then come back and do a retirement. Mind you, my emails are dropping in respect of what transactions relate to me. Now Jessica has gone for that conference and is back. So what she needs to do in terms of retirement is to raise an expense. So go to start expenses and then add employees Jessica, and then same date if she has her invoices for the conference, she's going to put it there. So she could say retirement of conference advance. Okay, and then in this case is conference and events. We said it's the same amount, so nobody's owing anybody. She paid cash. She paid to DJ. Yes, paid for conference. These are optional fields are not mandatory. I'm still going to use the same date as what we've been using, and then be consistent with my events, consistent with my location. If I click on the drop down, or what do I have? That's the employee code. Also, I would specify my program, and then this is okay. And then Jessica goes ahead to submit this particular. So you see that the status is submitted, and it's submitted to Chigozie, who would also get an email. You see that? Okay, so an email has come in for Jessica. So Chigozie would typically go to time and expenses, approve expense, and then go ahead and approve the expense for Jessica. I'm not going to bother to open it up. I've seen that in the earlier one, and then say approve. If he's not happy with it, he will decline and give a reason, and then it will go back to Jessica. Now that we have two things now. We have the cash advance of the 350 and we have the expense report of 350. We have to knock both of them against each other so it clears out. So what would typically happen would be to select expenses for reimbursement, and then I'm not going to specify any parameters. I'm just going to see list so that it brings out everything within the system. So you will see that it brings out the expense claim for Jessica for 350, and it's telling me that Jessica has an advance of 350. So in this case, I'm not paying anything because it's against this advance. So what I would typically do is enter the amount advances to apply, and once I do that and save, it clears out whatever was there in terms of 350 minus 350 plus 350, that's zero. So that clears it out. If I were to go to example for my report and I look at maybe expense ledger, I try to focus on Jessica, for example. Jessica 15, right? And then it will be, you will see that it's knocked off. So 350, 350, nothing is outstanding. Okay, so that takes care of it. So we'll go over to the third scenario where there's a cash advance of, let's say, same amount, 350, and then the actual expense is $300, which means whoever took that cash advance is supposed to pay back $50 to the company because the person didn't spend the entire sum. So it's going to start with the cash advance application. Look for, can I find an employee I've not used? Maybe 13. Description could be travel, in this case. and we'll use transportation, and then let's see, this is 280, and then it's maybe airfare to Ottawa. Just still consistent with my dimensions, and this employee is McPherson. Program the same, and then I go ahead and save. Sorry, it's right. I'll take note of that. And then this employee will be paying back, would incur an expense of 250. So that takes care of this, and it's there in the system. And then he's gone and he's back, and then he wants to retire. So he would enter his staff expense and then do an ad for Matt Pearson, and then as usual, provide the necessary attachments if there, and then retire travel expense, travel advance rather. And then, oh, sorry, before I go into this, I haven't, made payment to him, so I should come and do a print check. If I don't do that, that amount is not going to be outstanding, so I'll, print, and then that's a check for him. Some good money, $250. That's done, and then, I confirm this, and then it's gone. So now it's time to raise an expense that relates to that advance, and it's for Mark. With my person, I put my attachment, then all the expense, travel, advance, retirement. Okay, and then put the expense type is travels, transportation. It was 280, so it's retiring 250, and then you make payment cash paid to no, Air Canada, and for tickets, okay, and then what the date is same date, consistency with my dimensions, okay, scroll down here, and also programs, this, and then I'll go ahead and submit this. So it goes for approval. Oh, okay, and the approval is still cheap because they actually have raised that with. Okay, let me see who is gonna approve this. Oh, so this come to color. Uh, okay, let me do this all over again. Sorry, my bad. So, cash advance, quick one. I'll just be fast here. Cash advance for pick another user. Another employee, Martina, travel. That's one of the challenges when you have multiple accounts open. Then you have to do transportation. This time I'm going to say it's 400. Travel to British Columbia. What dimension? One. What location? One. The employee is Martina, and then uses this, and then I'll go ahead and save this, and then also go ahead and process the payment for Martina. Print checks. You would see that show up, so I'll do a print the check and give to her. It's for $400, and then I'll go ahead and confirm that, so that cash advance becomes available to her, to Martina, and the next thing will be retirement. So in terms of retirement, still Emma will raise an expense reporting for Martina. Dates, let's say we have an attachment for that expense, and we say travel advance retirement. Okay. And then expense type, I have travels, transportation. In this case, the advance was 400, but the actual expense was 350. Payment type was cash, paid to Air Canada. Yeah, payment was for flight tickets. Okay. So, and then the date of that transaction was 28. Consistency with my dimensions. And then I'll scroll down. If it was linked to a credit card, I can take that, but that's not what we're looking at now. And then with this, I can submit, and I've submitted my $300, which has gone for approval with Chigozie. So Chigozie would just go to approve expenses, and he would find that expense from Martina sitting there, and all he has to do is review and then approve or decline. So now that the expense has been approved, we have a cash advance of 400 and an expense of 350. We want to be able to process, reimbursements. And if there's any, if it depends on who is owing who. If there's an extra, so in this case, Martina is supposed to refund $50. So what you will do is go to select expenses for reimbursement. As usual, I won't specify any filter because maybe we do it periodically. I want to pay everybody within the system, but I could filter in terms of entity if necessary. But for the objective of this, I won't bother, and then I would run a list, and then you would see Martina show up. So this is Mark. It's showing up. Okay, so it was automatically approved initially, which is why I didn't see that. Let's just focus on Martina. So in this case, the expense was 350, and then the cash advance was 400. We're going to apply only 350 of the cash advance to this, and this is the bank, and then we would go ahead and save this. If I do another list, you will notice that, you see, it just produces that for McPherson because it's not been paid. And for Martina, Martina can't show up anywhere because Martina is the one owing the organization, not the organization owing Martina. So in this case, Martina has to pay the organization. So if I go to select expense to reimburse, I won't find anything because sorry, if I go to print checks, rather, because we've done this, I won't find Martina here because Martina is not being owed. Rather, she's supposed to make a payment on behalf of the company into the bank. So that takes care of this particular instance until she makes that payment and produces proof of payment, and then they will go ahead and process a cash management transaction to deal with that. So the last scenario we'll be looking at will be an instance where there's a cash advance of say $300, but there's an expense of say $500, which means at the end of the day the organization is supposed to reimburse the employee $200 as well. So we'll start by cash advance. Sorry, I keep missing clicking on that addition. So what employee do I use this time? Sometime use LM Culture. And then let's see, this is a conference. Okay, spelling right. Program rewards, still consistency. There's a type for conference and events. And let's see, this is what we said it's 300. Okay, and let's see, Drinks musical conference on a lighter note. Musical, oops, spelling. Okay, I'll just specify consistency, events I've used, location I've used. So I don't get error messages. It's for 14 or capture, and then I will save this. So This automatically is the cash advance, and then we'll go ahead to issue a check to her. You'll see that check, and print that check, and then either print it out, confirm, and then that payment is done. So she has or he has $300 cash advance that's expected to retire at a particular point in time. So some days later, the employee returns. It's time to do retirement with those staff expenses, and then who's the employee? You can add. The employee is pleasure. Date, and then receipts related to that transaction is provided. Reason is retirement or conference advance, and then in this case, you would still go to conference events. The amount is set 500, and then payment type just set up on the cash, and you pay to whoever was the event manager for Drake concert, and then specify what the date is. 28. Consistency with my dimensions, and then if I have to specify the program, the same. Oh, sorry, I'm not going to make that mistake again. Well, if I do this, it automatically gets approved because, let me just submit that. Okay, and that gets submitted, and the next thing will then be to look for expenses to reimburse, and I won't specify any parameter. I would expect to see two. The 250 I didn't process initially, and this particular 500. So you would see that I have an expense claim of 500 and an advance of 300, and I can apply an advance more than what this is. So I would, apply a $300 advance, and then I would, save that. Now, if I do a list again, let's see what it gives me. You see, it produces this, but it shows that there's a balance due to Ellen Percher for 200. So what I would do would be to go and make that payment of 200. We're going to print checks. Sorry. Okay. I did this, right? I already did this. So, okay, so we need to say we're paying this now, and then, save this. So by doing that, it becomes available on the print checks. So you see the $200. So I can do a print, and then confirm that, and that takes care of whatever that's being owed to her, or him. So all these the transactions are within the system. Checks are paid and all that. But you can come and look at your report. So for example, if there's anybody owing, if I there's just default reports, we can always customize. So you see that we have she's owing $50. Person is owing 30, and then from previous transactions I've done during my test, we can see who this is. If I also go to see, for example, my expense ledger for the same date, I can limit it by location, events, or employees. But I'm just going to do for everybody to see the listing, so you can see how it's grouped. For those owing, you see what they owe. For this, nobody's owing. Everything has been paid in full. So you see the check here, you see advance, and then you see the actual expense. And that's how it all goes through the system. So that's how you typically would run expense management within Sage Intacct, and it's very nice with system workflows, and then email notifications coming through. You can see all that within the system. So on that note, I would want to say thank you for your time, and it's been a good one. Uh, we'll be having more videos coming up. I think the next thing we'll be looking at is blanket purchase using purchase orders. All right, so thank you. Have a good day.